Okay, welcome back to March to a Million. Today we're going to do something new. We're going to periodically share case studies with you, a series we call Real Money, Real People. The series where we sit down with Greg and walk through an actual client situation to show you what financial planning looks like when life gets complicated. Today's case involves a woman we're going to call Margaret. She came to us recently, widowed, referred by her estate planning attorney. Her husband had handled the finances for their entire marriage. She was in good shape, real assets, real income. But underneath the surface, her financial life was structured in a way that was quietly costing her and her family a significant amount of money. And it didn't have to be that way. So, Greg, welcome, and thank you for bringing Margaret's story to us today. So let's get right into it. And why don't you set the scene? Who is Margaret and what brought her in?
Yeah, RJ, as we get into this, just a few comments about this new twist to our programming. You know, one of the things that I was getting in terms of feedback, a lot of things with people that have read my new book, The March to a Million, that have told me that they found so helpful and how much they enjoyed from the book, is the real stories of real people that they see this in application. And so instead of it in the print form, we're going to start talking about that in our conversations here on a periodic basis. We kind of mix things up every once in a while. And so let's talk about Margaret. Margaret is somebody that, came in through a WSN reference, an attorney that we work with, that, knows that there's more to life than just creating documents. And so when we started to talk to Margaret, we had this picture that she was, kind of, it's one I see a lot, where we've recently widowed and trying to get our bearings on things. And she knew that she had enough money. Her husband had set her up that way, that was not a concern. But she had a nagging feeling that, there was something that was missing, something that he would have done, or that he would do better than her. And so that's why we had a conversation. Because he'd managed his finances for decades, and he did a great job, set her up so that she had nothing to worry about. As we took a surface level look at this, she looked fine. She had about $2 million of investable assets. Social Security was significant, and her cost of living was low. And so she was in a spot where she wanted to make sure, as all, that her money supports her life in the way that she wanted to live it. So we defined that. What does that look like? How much does that take? And then she has children and extended kids, for this matter, that she wanted to make sure that they received a significant inheritance. She didn't want it to go to Uncle Sam.
Okay, well, that's understandable. Okay, you said it looked fine on the surface. Now, as you looked at it, what did your gut tell you when you started looking more deeply into this?
Well, I found out that her husband, like many do-it-yourselfers, had a portfolio that was doing great throughout a bull market, and that's what had driven that growth. But here she stood in her mid-70s with a portfolio that was basically all in equities, all at risk. And so when we started talking about how she was now in this spot where she has RMDs that she has to take, and whether or not she wanted to take the money out of that investment, she had to. And how that when I explained to her the problem with sequence of return risk, that if the market went down, she'd have to take it out regardless. And so it exacerbates losses. And once she understood those implications, that's when she realized that that's not the way that she wanted to live the rest of her life. She wanted to have reliable, predictable income to require for those RMDs, but not have to be at risk in the market.
Okay, can you then walk us through that? Be a little more specific.
So what we did after we figured out what she had and what she wanted. Okay. But she had like $2 million, as I mentioned, and only about 100,000 of it was not in the retirement accounts, and all of those were in low-cost mutual funds. And so we've stuck to the first step, which was taking the risk out of her portfolio and putting it into reliable, predictable, protected growth annuities and such. That one of them also was designed to provide extra payments if she needed long-term care. So we are able to protect against that risk by taking the risk out of the portfolio. So that one level there, changing the way that her pieces were on the chessboard, reduced the risk that she had, reduced the exposure to long-term care, and also gave her that certainty that she was looking for.
Looking at your notes, you mentioned something about the Secure Act piece. Can you expand on that and share what that is and explain it to a person like myself who is not well versed in this?
So let's take a step back, because my notes are ahead of my conversation.
Okay.
That's why we do these things, so we can work our way through it. So when she understood that her life savings, that she inherited much of it from her husband, that when it went to her kids, we did a tax analysis to show her that because of the Secure Act, that her kids were going to be beaten with taxes, because they had to take it out over at least no more than 10 years. And whenever somebody takes an inheritance that is an IRA, 401k, etc., it comes out as taxable income, affecting their current tax rates going up because it's now added to the household income. That's what happened with the Secure Act. Before the Secure Act, we were able to stretch it out for the kids' lifetimes. So when we ran the numbers on that for her, the numbers became stark. And when we started doing this plan, over her lifetime, it was projected that there were going to be taxes of about $8 million paid during her lifetime and upon what was left behind. And then when we started adding this level of structure to it, ultimately we got her down to a position where her lifetime and death tax bill was reduced by $5 million.
Is that something that all financial advisors, people dealing with finances, should be aware of and apply that to the clients they're working with? Because, you say the Secure Act and it just slides right over my head. I mean, there's no hair to stop it. It just goes right by me. So is that something that advisors should be telling their clients, or is that something that it's actually on the client?
To answer your question phrased as should it, yes, it should be. Is it is a different question altogether. Attorneys that are in the estate planning world or hold themselves out as being able to do estate planning, scriveners of wills, etc. They're not talking about this. I was at a high level estate planning conference last beginning of the fall. And in that conference of several hundred estate planning attorneys, very few of them knew of the Secure Act. Very few of them knew of the 10-year restrictions. Very even fewer knew that there was something that could be done with it. So if we take a look at what we did in this situation, once we identified that problem that she wanted to fix, we brought in the one solution that provided her with long-term care coverage, so that if she had to take additional monies out because of a long-term care need, she was further protected from the sequence return risk, because that had that protected floor that we talk about for those annuity products. And then because the RMD was going to come out anyways, because she needed that to fuel what we're going to talk about in a minute, we added another level with a special product that says, okay, if you take the money out for your RMDs, we're going to keep it in here for the death benefit. So typically, if you took $100,000 out of your account for RMDs, you'd lose that $100,000. Well, this is particularly specially designed so that it doesn't come out of the death benefit. So it still be there for the kids. So in a way, they're having their cake and eating it too.
Okay. So once you see you see the full picture, you see everything she has and what she wants to do. I mean, it's to me, it seems overwhelming. So where do you start with all of this?
Well, as we always start, first, how do we solve the income? How do we manage the income for the client for the least amount of capital? Let's isolate that. So we did that analysis for her, and we saw, okay, we needed this. And then we also saw that above what she needed for her living, the RMDs were excess money. Okay. And so what we've done from that is we've now added another layer of a gifting program on top of it for her. So we've started by protecting the income for her life the way that she wants to live it. We've got a way to make money come out in a protected fashion. And then what we've done is we've built on a gifting program to her 4 kids. On top of that, she had about $100,000 of money that had to come out because of RMDs, and we took that $100,000 and we have now moved it into a gifting program where for each one of the 4 kids, we are buying a leveraged life insurance product for them, which turns around for each one of them when each child is in their retirement years, is going to pay them between $22,000 and $30,000 a year for 25 years, tax-free. So we've taken this situation where what the portfolio was going to do was have mom at uncomfortable risk. It was going to have the IRS benefit from any significant growth in that because it's all taxable. And she was going to be paying tax more and more along the way. And so we've now had this 5-year gift program that's going to reduce those funds tremendously, give them off to the kids in a tax-free environment, get it out of her estate. And as I said, we've basically dropped the projected taxes that the family would pay during lifetime and upon death by in excess of $5 million.
So is that all the steps, or are there more steps to this process as far as dealing with this?
There's ongoing monitoring and management of something like this, but it is basically from the client's perspective. It is a very simple process. We understand what we want. Here's how we're going to get that with the least amount of capital necessary. Then we go from there and we say, okay, how can we use this? What's the best way to use it? We've done similar programs for other people, and the gifting is different. It's all bespoke to the people, but that's where being an advocate, having access to all the tools in the toolbox, come to play to be able to develop some really unique outcomes.
So you're going through all these steps that a person has to take, and I have to say that this is still above my pay grade. So can you walk me through these different tools and different steps that I need to take and use plain English for my purposes?
And RJ, that's what I appreciate about our conversations. You keep me grounded. So let's take it step by step, and I'll try to share what I can without going into problems with compliance.
Okay.
Let's take the first step. Okay, so when we first sat down, we gathered all the data for the client, right? Again, and most attorneys won't get into the weeds with their finances, but that's what separates us from the milieu of estate planning attorneys. And so when we did that, I was able to run a analysis of the portfolio to determine what was the risk profile on it. And I compared that to what her risk profile is. And she says, I don't want to lose money. And her portfolio was set up to, if it was a bear market, the way that it was constructed, it would lose 30 to 40% of its value. So right there, we know that we have a red flag. And when we're having our conversation, she says, yep, I don't want to lose 40% of my money. And so when we start talking a little further with that, when she realizes, hey, if this does continue to grow, what's the impact of that? And that's when we start talking about, okay, here is the tax analysis that shows you what's going to happen with this money, how much is going to be paid to Uncle Sam during your lifetime, and what's going to be the erosion on that for the kids that you want to maximize what they get. And that's when she says, I don't like that either. Okay. So what would you like? Here are some options that we've got. So we walk through a handful of options. We talked about Roth conversions and those kind of things, and those tools. And for her, that didn't really make a lot of sense because of her age. There wasn't enough time to recoup that loss. So how do we go ahead and still maximize the situation? Well, as I mentioned, the first thing that we did is we suggested that we get the risk out of the portfolio. And we did that by introducing 2 different annuity products. One that was going to provide her, both of them were going to provide a floor against any type of loss in the market and be able to pull out those RMDs as she wanted to. So we have one of them that's out there to fund the RMD that she needs without it affecting the death benefit, like I mentioned a little while ago. And the other one, well, it took care of the other risk that's facing her, which is what happens if I need money for long-term care. She could pull out an accelerated amount of that to pay for long-term care.
Okay.
Once we got those things decided, when she said, yep, that's what I like, we implemented that phase where we de-risked the portfolio. We got her steady income going forward. And then we started talking about what are other things that can be done, because she wants to maximize what goes to the kids. And that's where we started talking about, okay, well, you can give money to them now because she wants to give money to them now and to her grandkids now. And we do have a plan for her to continue to do that. But when I showed her, here is another option as well, that we can not just give them money and have them hopefully invest it, let alone spend it. They're going to invest it in some form of a taxable situation. And when I shared with her, okay, here's what we can do instead. We can put this money into a structured life insurance policy, specially structured, so it's called a Kaizen plan. And what that does is automatically, when she puts money in, there's money that's being met in the form of a policy loan that is brought in by a bank. That she puts $25,000 in, the bank puts $25,000 in, and she does that for 5 years. And when she's done 5 years, well, the banks can continue putting money in too, and the bank will get paid out down the road because of the strength of the product and the loan. And this is all turnkey for her. All she needs to do is every year we got to come up with that gifting money to go into that. So there's nothing that she needs to do on a regular basis. So as she now sits back, she gets, instead of how she had before with multiple accounts spitting out that she had to manage her RMDs, she now has her RMD check sent to her every year. She now has that money that goes to the insurance policies to pay those off, automatically sent there. She doesn't have to worry about a thing. All she has to do is enjoy her life. And when she passes away, the kids are going to get everything.
Well, that's good. So she's got her situation all settled and her kids will benefit from this. To a person like myself listening, what signals should I be listening or watching for, not listening, but watching for to avoid that situation that Margaret found herself in?
It's not so much the situation that she found herself in. It's where she could have been. Okay. Because many times in the aftermath after losing a loved one, spouse that has been there taking care of things for years on end. There is a tendency to kind of close in and think that, okay, I'm just trying to move my life.
Right.
Now, understand that when I first met with Margaret, it was months before we did all this, because you don't want to go into anything like this in a rush. So you got to have the space to deal with the healing as much as possible. But she had, the insight and an important person in her life that kind of showed her the way to talk to me. And that's really what we need to be thinking about. When, so many listeners to this program have parents, and we've always talked about this, the generational shift of wealth, and when one of them passes away, we need to know that there are things that can be done at that point in time to really change things. And just going to, just doing the same old as Margaret would have done can really lose an opportunity for the family.
So where's Margaret today?
Happily enjoying her life, watching her RMD check come in once a year and paying that off and playing with her grandkids.
So it's a happy ending.
A happy ending for now. Yep. She is happy and healthy. So we fully expect the 5-year program to go through while she's still around, and we might then turn and do one for the grandkids.
So is the sort of lesson you want listeners to take away from this story is you have to really check and double check and adjust your situation as you age? Is that sort of the message here?
The message is sometimes this status quo needs to be challenged, and just having enough is not really enough. I mean, in the sense that, she could have just kind of ridden off in the sunset, continuing to live her life, letting everything accumulate the way it was, without knowing that she was basically building a bigger paycheck for the IRS. But coming up for air, having a professional look at the situation to show this is the ramifications of what's going on. Here's a different way. And again, we basically project to save the family about $5 million.
That's an impressive number, I should say. Greg, as always, thank you for making a situation like this. When I first started listening, it was way above my head, and you were able to bring it to a level where it makes sense to me, and that's the important thing in with communication. So thank you for doing that. And for anyone who is like me and needs a little more explanation or just needs the picture to be a little more clearer with RMDs, estate exposure, and whatever, how do they reach you?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you, RJ, for being confused.
That's a very easy thing for me. It doesn't take much effort.
And all candor, it's good to have a sounding board on these things to be able to make sure that we're communicating the points appropriately. And if anybody wants to reach out to me, the best way to get a hold of me to see kind of my universe is to go to www.gsdupont.com, which is my central point to my universe. And if this story or the idea of learning through hearing how we've helped other families resonates with you, check out my book, March to a Million. That's available on Amazon.com.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Greg. And if you know someone who is recently widowed, recently retired, or sitting on a large IRA balance without a distribution strategy, share this episode with them. The conversation Greg had with Margaret could change their family's financial picture. We'll see you next time.